Welcome to Being Human. Phillida Fleming, fellow partner at FirstHuman. It's my great pleasure to be here in your cottage on the Isle of Wight for this conversation today.
Great to have you here.
So Phillida, you're involved in supporting leaders developing themselves. Let's start with, what do you see as the definition of being a leader?
Well, that's an interesting question. For me, leadership is certainly not necessarily something that comes with designation or accountability, but more of a phenomenon that shows up when someone, whoever they may be, is committed to producing something that's probably goes way beyond themselves. And they can start to produce that or close to that. And then what they're producing currently really isn't happening already. Why would you want to bother to get into action and lead something that isn't that's happening? A leader, the kind of leadership the people that I work with are interested in, is producing results that currently are not happening. So anyway, does that start to begin to answer what is a massive question, really?
So it's about producing results that aren't currently happening. So going beyond what's currently happening.
Yeah, something you get committed to something and you want to produce it, then that requires leadership first of yourself. So a quality of someone who is displaying the phenomenon of leadership is that they are deeply self-reflective, in my view.
Right, and they're reflective in a way in which they're leading themselves.
Absolutely. They are observing themselves. They are noticing what they're doing. They're constantly looking and reviewing and creating their leadership. And why are they bothering to do that? Because they are committed to producing something. And they're committed to producing something that is way bigger than just them.
So way bigger than just them and way bigger than what's currently happening.
Yep. So the kind of people I'm interested in working with are, they're up for something. They're up for something. They want to make something happen, and that has a value that's significant, and that can look all sorts of different ways.
Okay, and what's a great example for people then of what you see as being something that's significant that in your experience a leader has taken on, or maybe you've taken on?
Gosh, great! It was many great examples. It could be that they want to cause a shift in, one key thing that's I've often worked with people is a shift in safety, because there's a deep commitment to taking care of people. And the leader may put that center stage and have that be the outcome, have measures and outcomes that are way off the scale of what currently is in existence, but they demonstrate everything, the value to the bottom line, all the other aspects of a business. And they are about profoundly demonstrating their commitment to their people, their customers, all the stakeholders.
Okay, so demonstration is part of it, but is it right that my access to being demonstrated or to demonstrating this is the self-reflection, is leading myself?
Well, in my view, yes. I think, look, one way you can lead is command and control, and there's nothing wrong with that, except it produces a certain kind of environment. And in my view, if you want to get others to come along with you of their own free will, to join you to produce something that currently isn't happening or isn't in existence, then it's going to require you being willing to look at yourself and what environment are you making around yourself in which others can do that. Now, are they able to step up and join you? And at least in my experience, when you are busy commanding people, telling people, instructing people, it creates a different environment, not that one.
But some may say that by telling them, that's another way of having people step up and help one manifest whatever it is that you're looking to manifest. So why is it perhaps less effective, or why is it? Yeah.
Well, if you look for yourself, when you take something on, when you commit to something, and something that you can see you'd really love to have happen, but you really don't know how to have it happen, but you really love to have that thing happen, and it would be deeply satisfying to you to have it happen, then there's a whole energy that comes with it. But being in a work environment where you're willing to take the risk to do it, means that at some point somewhere, unless you're just very bold and courageous yourself, which you might be, someone is creating an environment in which you can dare to take the risk. And to really take yourself on. I've lost what you asked me in the first place now.
We were contrasting between command and control and this style of leadership, which seems like it's much more about me and who I am, and much less about telling others. And my challenge was, well, why is it that it's less effective to
just tell others?
Just tell others, because that's a way of getting people to step up.
Yeah, well, it certainly is. And it gets a certain kind of result. It just won't get the kind of high performance that people who get committed to produce something extraordinary are looking for. It's far less likely, because you have a sort of compliance and obedience. And when you choose something of your own volition, then that's a whole different matter than just obeying the rules or being obedient or doing it because otherwise you might get into trouble or be penalized in some way, or because there's some uninvestigated drivenness that you haven't looked at that just has you habitually do it.
Okay. But if I commit profoundly, was the word you used, wasn't it? If I commit profoundly to having something happen, then I'm creating an environment in which others do do the same or something similar.
Yes, absolutely. And for senior leadership, particularly, in my view, that is the job of senior leadership, is to create an environment in which your people are willing and free to step up. And that for them is predicated in what they most care about, what's most important to them. And in order to create an environment in which your people are willing to step up and join you to produce something unprecedented, then you've got to create an environment in which they are able to do that. And to do that, that takes looking at what am I creating around me? What is the impact of everything I'm doing? What is coming out of my mouth? What am I wittingly and unwittingly causing around me? And that for me is a key aspect of senior leadership or any leadership.
Okay. So if I'm taking myself on and I'm leading myself, where do I, practically for people listening to this, where do I start looking? I mean, what's the mechanism for this taking myself on?
Okay. Well, I'm going to be curious about, for want of a better expression, what the neuroscientists call my internal model. And if you and I consider that you and I have an internal model through which we experience the world, and what this internal model gives us, what we can get of the world out here. So if I am able to start to observe that internal model, then I've got an access into why I do X and why I do Y, and that'll give me start to have me tune into the environment I'm creating, wittingly or unwittingly. And in order to observe my internal model, I have a dilemma because I'm so inside the internal model. It's tough because I'm so in it. It just seems that it is how it is for me. This little human being, that's just how it is for me. However, I can start to notice it. One access is, how am I talking to myself about the world? That dialogue, that internal dialogue, starts to inform me about the internal model I'm operating from and looking through, that's giving me what I see of the world. So in that way, I can start to observe this thing I call myself and discover what happens if I notice that and I try something other than that. So the beginning is noticing through the first access, or the beginning of observing that access is to listen to myself. Well, that's interesting. I'm talking to myself about this. So starting to consider that you and I aren't really listening to the world out here. We're listening to ourselves, talking to ourselves about the world.
Right.
You want me to say that again?
Yes, I think there may be some people who...
Yeah. So considering that you and I, right now, we're not listening to each other. We're listening to ourselves, talking to ourselves about each other or about what's happening.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm listening to the story I have about.
I'm talking to myself. And I'm listening through that interpretation to the world out here. Now, if I start to observe, tune in and listen to how I'm talking to myself, that's going to start to shed a light on something for me. It's going to start to point to things that really work, fantastic, and also things that don't work. Now, what I mean don't work, things that I say don't work. They don't work because they're not consistent with actually what I'm committed to and what I'm out to produce. And if you start to get committed, if you're committed to something that's, you know, bigger than you and that's not been produced before, then as a senior leader, let's assume you're a senior leader, as a senior leader, been starting to observe myself to see what am I creating and causing around me is a very smart place to start. And you can't underestimate the impact a senior leader is having in how they are behaving, what they're saying, who they're being, all of that, at least from my view, and I know our view at FirstHuman, is creating and causing the environment in which all their people are operating.
Okay, but it starts though with what am I saying to myself? How am I talking to myself?
Yeah.
And then looking at what impact it's having out there.
Yeah.
Is there an example of where you've tuned in to your own internal model, to your own internal conversation, and found that it's been inconsistent with a commitment you've got out there?
Oh gosh, all the time, constantly. Moment to moment, you and I are constantly dealing with either we are running true to who we consider ourselves and say we are, or not. And there's these little moments where we have choices and can choose. We can choose. A lot of the time, we're not noticing it. Now, if I bring it back to senior leadership, you simply can't afford to do that, because a senior leader's been listened to as much as other people are listening to you. They're watching you. They're watching you mostly, not always, but through, are you behaving like you say you are, or I think you ought to? Some version of that. You know, if you take this idea that each of us are walking around in our own internal model, talking to ourselves about the world, if you start to imagine this is an idea, I'm not saying it's the truth, it's a pretty powerful interpretation, that everyone's walking around inside their little internal model. And if you look at it for yourself and start to examine it, it's full of judgments and assessments and opinions. And by the way, center stage of the piece is each of us in our own little soap opera. Now, if I'm a leader, they're like the they, you know, this sort of nebulous they out here. I can at least take the case that they are observing and watching me to test me to see if I what I say I am. And because, I don't know, if you look for yourself, do you notice that that's something you do in some way or other?
Immediately, like with my family. I mean, if I tell myself my stand for my family is to be a loving, supportive father, a loving, supportive partner, and if I'm picking an argument, let's say with my partner, and you know, I can see that, or at least sometimes I can see that after the fact, but I can see that I'm not that loving partner, not that loving father, often, frequently, a lot of the time. And so I can absolutely see where I'm not acting consistent with my commitment to who I'm going to be for my family.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great example. And if I espouse values as a leader for my organization, and then I'm not looking to see, am I being those values, and bringing a discipline to that, which I would suggest is a matter of my looking. I've got to look here. I've got to keep looking here. I've got to keep examining, reflecting here, being deeply self-reflecting to see, am I running true to what I espouse? Because at least I can take the case that the they out there, they're watching. And the minute I don't, what does it do? Well, it grants them permission to behave to behave like me. So if I'm in a senior position, I'm creating that environment. Now, if I'm granting them the permission to behave that way, I can also grant them the permission to be extraordinary. It's going to take me working here to be extraordinary. And how am I going to be extraordinary when I'm going to have to keep looking here?
And that's what's interesting to me, is that this flips a lot of the conversation, because often, because there may be people, and I'm listening to this thinking, enough with the navel gazing, right? Mm-hmm. Enough with this reflection. No, it's about the action you take, and it's about what you're going to make happen.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I'm totally with you there. And what gives you your actions? So what does give you your actions, Richard? What has you do what you do? Because, of course, we all want to produce great results, or we've got results we're on the hook for, or committed to, or however we might talk about it. And in business, people are really, really interested in results, of course. And what gives us results are our actions. Very smart, great. Now, the really interesting question is, what gives me my actions? Well, what I would say, and what in the work we do, we would offer, and our clients also work on for themselves, is that what's in the background is driving the actions, wittingly or unwittingly. So my capacity to notice what is actually running the show creates for me the choice to powerfully create a context in which the actions are consistent with what I'm committed to. So I'm going to have to start to get really clear, what am I committed to? And then keep creating that environment, that commitment, that future, that vision, however my mission, however you might want to talk about that, what I see as possible. I'm going to have to keep creating that and keep generating for myself an authentic relationship to it. And that still means I'm going to have to keep looking here, looking here, looking here. And then observing. And my results are going to tell me how on track I am or not. And they're really critical. So the results tell me, am I operating consistent with what I'm standing for, what I'm creating? They tell me that, but also the results I'm out to produce are measures that world that I'm creating is coming into existence. So it's all critical.
Okay. And what if we take the view that, yes, but the world is so complex that what's going on in my little head in the morass of all this complexity, it can't really relate to the results out there, can it? I mean, isn't it more about the system that's organising itself to have something happen, and what's going on in my little head really can't impact the results out there?
Yes. Well, that's very seductive. It's very seductive because it so gets us off the hook to think like that. Now you can, by the way, you can, and plenty do, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's not the perspective that we or I are offering. What we're offering, or what we look at, is that by looking at myself and checking out where am I operating from, is it my commitment or is it something else? And what the heck else is this something else, which is a whole interesting conversation in itself. Then I can have a powerful relationship to the circumstances that come at me. Now, it's totally valid to consider that there's just circumstances and I've just got to deal with them. That's a perfectly valid way to look at life. However, it's not the most powerful way of looking at it as far as we're concerned. It's more powerful to consider there just are circumstances. Can I see more of them and the opportunities that arise? And what am I unwittingly, what am I attributing to those circumstances, which it's got nothing to do with the circumstances in and of themselves? And that comes back to the same thing. Now, when you get a group of senior leaders who all have the wherewithal, who have started to create an environment together where they each are self-reflecting, able to look at themselves and find ways to talk about that, so that they together become a straight line with regard to a commitment they've all aligned to.
I'm very interested in an example from you. Where have you tuned in to your internal model and then shifted that and seen a correlating shift out there?
There's lots of them. There's the one. There's so many. It's always difficult to choose, isn't it? And a very obvious one was when I was taking myself to the a new level of being able to work with people. I was leading a program, and I was being developed by colleagues, and they kept saying, "You're not following the instructions." And for the life of me, I am following the instructions. I am. However, I was absolutely aware that in that particular environment, that context, I didn't have my full freedom of expression. You know those times when you experience, you're sort of being frustrated at yourself, you can't quite get yourself freed up to just be out here with the other human beings. There's something inhibiting you. You know that experience. And it was like that. So my full power wasn't available to me. And so the person mentoring me, guiding me, training me, however you want to look at it, really challenged me on that I hadn't set up an exercise. as she had asked. And for the life of me, I had no idea that I hadn't. So I said to her, I must have forgotten. And she just said, I just don't buy it. And then I really had to grapple with this experience, this really confronting experience and I felt incredibly upset, suddenly, incredibly upset, and realized that she had, for me, become, it was as if she was Sister Mary Joseph from my childhood, when I was at school. And, and I was about, if I aged myself, I was about sort of 7 years old. And what I saw about that is that the decision I had taken when I was that small girl was now running the show in the background. And so I had already decided how she was and how my colleagues were, and I was being like a 6-year-old. I was being like a 6-year-old with them, and I went back and I carried on working with the clients, and I got it really clearly for myself, the internal dialogue I was in, completely hidden from my view, which is, I'll never be like you. Now, as it happened, I was working with a group of Americans, and I was the only British on the team. And it just was as clear as a bell to me. Wow. I was completely invalidating them because they were Americans, I was British. I know they're going to be like you. And and that, hidden from my view, was what was driving my actions. Now, when I saw that, I had to come to terms with what a bigot I was. Now, how this unexamined bias in the background. And when I looked at it, I was born in the 50s, so my childhood was in the sort of late 50s, the 60s, and how Americans were for me in our childhood, all unexamined and all quite innocent in and of itself, except now it was right in my way for to really be who I said I am. And to be able to do the work that I was deeply committed to. And it was a terrific thing to see, because then I could say, oh my goodness, I'm just, gosh, I'm making you wrong just because you're American. And, I'm really sorry about that. And, but the freedom, the release was extraordinary. Because the other thing I saw about, when the small girl decided that about Sister Mary Joseph, who was a pretty big figure in my life, I really, really decided I will not be like you. And that shaped so much, so many decisions. What I could do, it sort of shaped that in a certain sort of direction, but also shaped what I couldn't do. It was a self-imposed constraint, unwittingly, that I put on myself. And so the impact, the shift was massive, because I suddenly was able to make the whole arena I was operating even showed up differently, things looked different, the results I was able to produce. My colleagues became other human beings versus objects that I hadn't even realized they were. I was so sort of surviving this new environment I put myself in. I was sort of surviving it inside this frame, hidden from my view. And then when I saw it, I could be with them fully. I could allow them in too. So the whole thing shifted. Shifted for me, shifted for them, shifted for the team, shifted for the clients. Like that. Does that illustrate it?
Yeah, perfect.
By the way, it wasn't that difficult to really start to see it, because what was the interesting factor was my commitment, and not letting myself off the hook with my commitment.
And it was your commitment who kept you in that conversation.
Because,
it had you look. It had
my
you
commitment. My commitment. I took on this. This was way out of my comfort zone. I was committed to my family. I had taken on for myself that I was going to grow and develop myself in this way. Now, what am I going to do? Am I going to jump off the helter-skelter when it's kind of doing its thing? No, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to deal with what there is to deal with to liberate myself from this self-imposed constraint. So, and it just was extraordinary experience for me. It wasn't comfortable. But then the results that started to emerge were very comfortable. They weren't comfortable. They were great. And then, of course, there's the next mountain, right? That's how life is. Whatever that is.
Yeah. I love that. And the other thing I'm with, and we talk about this sometimes, is, and this relates, is the listening we have for others. And we touched on this earlier in the conversation. So the idea that how I listen to somebody else, the listening I have for them, impacts them in a way that they show up differently, and they can be free to be something different. And what interests me is the limits to that. So I can absolutely get how that works. What do we do when we find somebody who, no matter how generous we are in our listening for them, they seem unable to shift, or there's somebody who we can't work together with towards a commitment? How do we deal with that?
Well, there's lots of possible things that are really going on. It's just, are they actually committed to what you're committed to? Probably that's the source of it, I would guess. It's a bit academic what you said, so I always prefer looking at real-time examples because you can just get it identified. So there are getting straight, whilst we're advocating that you and I really reflect upon ourselves and elevate our capacity to be responsible for ourselves. And really, we're talking about that, elevating that. This doesn't mean that you don't hold others to account. Actually, it gives you much more power and freedom to hold others to account. Because now I've got more facility with getting clear. Am I operating from a commitment I have, or am I operating from somewhere else? Which is what screws us up if we can't hold people to account, is because we're in shaky territory somewhere for ourselves, right? Otherwise it's just boom. And you know that with your own children. You hold them to account, no kidding, because you're clear where you stand. I mean, these are your kids. And you stand for them beyond your lifetime. So you hold them to account. I mean, in the way that parents do. And so what's likely is there's some mismatch of actually what you're committed to and need to get straight. Look, there's people who they simply aren't committed to that or aren't willing to be part of what you're creating. That's fine. And maybe they have very limited capacity to be in communication with you about that. I don't know. It's a bit academic, so it's hard to tell.
But it's useful to think about that, because I think whilst it's absolutely true that I believe that who we are on the inside and how that manifests on the outside does impact those around us, and of course there's studies in neuroscience and so on to suggest that evidence for that. and it has its limits, and that's always interesting to me. Is when is it time to keep investing in this relationship, in these interactions, and stay in a conversation about how do I cause a shift here, and when is it time to say, okay, my energy is not best spent in this relationship or this set of relationships.
Well, there's no rule to that,
No,
but
of
it'll
course.
all come to, are your, what they're committed to, you committed to, sufficiently overlapping? And so it comes back to what we were saying earlier, that all of it's predicated in what I most care about, what I stand for, what I say. As big as you could say what my life's about. Am I running true to what I say my life's about? And for me, that, at the heart of the work we do with clients, that conversation is really important. It's the foundation. So, and it's not a fixed thing. That conversation is a dynamic phenomenon that you and I are constantly in, and creating and having that arise for ourselves. So spending time being aware of it, or presencing it, or checking oneself out against it, and therefore also that makes it a lot easier to start to see, oh, okay, this person, we're just not working on the same things. Now, depending on the environment in which that arises, I would have a certain number of choices to make.
Yeah, I see it.
And it actually makes it more straightforward. I don't think they're ever easy. But senior leadership, that is definitely something senior leaders have to do, and being able to find a powerful way to, and rigorous, to be scrupulous with oneself. Back here, that's it. You've got to start looking here. Let me check it out, so that I can be sure that I'm can know that I know I'm I can sleep easy.
In the choices that I make.
Yeah.
With the choices I make. Yeah. Okay. And I know that you're going to say there's no formula to this. But let's see if we can explore some of the recurring questions that I think are arising here. So there's something about what am I committed to. There's what's my listening for this situation, this person, what's going on inside. Who am I being is another key question, isn't it? Are there any others there? Any other access points to what we're describing?
I was just wondering about that one, who am I being? I was just wondering about it. See, this is the nature as well of the work, is to keep looking, and even in a conversation like this, which by its nature is a little theoretical, the work we do is very, very operational, and therefore we're always looking, working with our clients in such a way that they're looking, and then the shift with regard to what they're up to is just boom, boom. I mean, it's like a big shift. And that's a tricky thing to illustrate in this sort of a way. So I suppose that's another thing I'm pointing to in this menu you've gone through. I suppose, well, what are the results I'm producing? That's a pretty good indicator. What are the results I'm producing? That's going to tell me quite a lot. And that's why for us, the results, the design of the results, all of that's really critical. That you've got ways of evidencing that you are producing, or you are the manifestation of what it is you're committed to. Be it that you want to double a turnover or whatever the heck it is, because there's so many different ways you can talk about that.
Yeah. Well, and that makes complete sense, because if we're coming from a place that says who I am, what I am on the inside, it is reflected out there, then of course it's important to look out there as well as is
and that's
in
part
here.
of the job that I might do, or we might do, is I can think of occasions, and I'm certainly not going to mention any names, where I've gone on site and I've started to talk to people around the environment in the organisation, and then I'll go to the CEO and I'll say, well, I'm getting this, so what's going on with you? And because I think that's a reflection. I think that's a really smart CEO will, and I've got a few, and they're absolutely amazing at this. Will go, they might argue for a little bit of it. Oh yeah, okay. Oh, and then have an insight, and shifts the whole environment in which everyone's operating. So, as a senior person in an organization, you just can't underestimate coming back to what we were saying at the beginning, the impact you're having across the organization. And to keep looking at it, to keep shifting it. Now, how you're going to see that is through observing your results, but you can go out and talk to your people and hear what they're saying and what are they stuck in, and that's a really useful resource, because it starts to shed a light on something for you.
Yeah.
Does that help with that?
No, it does, and I'm still smiling at the challenge that you put in these situations. To see, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's encouraging that self-ownership, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really not saying that this is true. I'm not saying it isn't true or is true. I'm saying that if I look there's always something I can work on. And there is an enormous difference when I work with a CEO whose people absolutely love this person. And so if at any point that person does not operate consistent with this, that's going to be extremely upsetting for their people. So it's a man, so it's a man. That he works on himself is really critical. And mostly that looks like keeping on dealing with himself and whatever the future, the possibility, the vision, whatever it is he is standing for, that he keeps that powerfully alive for himself, and he's organized from there, and it emanates out from him. And then it's infectious, like a virus, through his people.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of ways of working on that, by the way. Now that we haven't even got close to today, we just started to scrape the surface.
But you're right. There's always going to be something there, and it reminds me of that. The quality of the intervention relates to the quality of the internal condition of the intervener.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if we don't start here in our in looking at our own internal condition before we take the action, and we might take some action which is designed to shift the system in some way or the environment in some way. So we might take some action out there, but the likelihood of it being impactful in the way that is consistent with your commitment will be entirely related to who you're being as you do it, as you take the action.
That simple little idea, and the neuroscientists say the whole thing's constructed, the whole experience of the world out here is constructed in your brain, and it's all a construct. So, which is a mind-blowing idea, and therefore I'm going to have to keep looking at the construct to have something happen out here different from what just habitually will happen if I just let the machine run. Now, if you imagine it like, I can just let the machine run. And okay, what happens if I start intervening with the machine? Why? Because actually I'm designing what I'm committed to, and I want to interrupt the machine to better produce what I'm committed to, rather than being someone who's surviving something or is driven because, I want to be better than someone else or whatever else it is. Actually, I'm committed to producing something. What am I going to have to deal with the idiot here? Because the idiot's the one that gets in the way. This flipping idiot here. And it's coming to terms with you and I as human beings. There's a commonality across the planet, at least. You scrape back the cultures, and I tell you, you end up with human being. And what seems to be really consistent is, unwittingly, whether we like it or not, we see difference. And we can't help but see differences. And of course, we suck up interpretations. We construct them ourselves in ways to survive life. We just sort of inherit them. There's all sorts of ways you and I are unwittingly or have unwittingly created that frame. Now, if I can notice it, what it just provides me with is, in the moment, a choice consistent with what am I actually committed to? And, I'm coming back to it takes some work to really get clear on that. And as a leadership team, creating what are we committed to, which for each individual is predicated on what's really important to them, and the sufficient overlap. So together, we're much more than the sum of the parts. We're now about causing something much bigger than that.
Right. But again, and that starts with what am I committed to personally? What am I interested in? And then how can I see that in this broader commitment?
Yeah, and I think what's perhaps surprising, but at least seems to be impactful for people, is that you and I don't spend a lot of time really looking at what am I committed to. Really, what the heck is my life about? Why I'm here on this little planet, and keeping on examining it. Why? Because maybe that's a more powerful place to operate from than the push and pull of this survival mechanism I've got, this brain that is set up to have me survive. Mostly what I'm surviving is things I thought seemed as if they were threats when I was a small kid, or even things I've kind of inherited, sucked in. And the more you and I each can take on getting beyond that, the more we can be open to the vast complexity of the tapestry, coming back to what you said about complexity, that is this thing human being? And to allow the them out there to be who they are and who they're not. And then to invite them to partner with us to cause something that we both could get committed to. So, and it's, apart from anything, it's just an amazing way to live your life. So there's a lot of, fallout. You can't work on this and not have it impact everything. So that's the kind of, bonus with regard to.
That's right. You work in this way in any place in your life, and it affects all of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's always you.
For me, a profound commitment I have is extraordinary leadership in the world, and I'm really interested in people who have put themselves into leadership positions, who are committed to causing something to happen beyond themselves. They're up for something. I'm really interested in that, and that they're deeply self-reflective. That to me, that shines such a bright light for the future, for our grandchildren, our grandchildren's children, to create the kind of discovery, to keep opening up what this bunch of idiots called the human beings running around our planet at the moment can see and not see in the little frames we're stuck in. So the more we can open up and find ways to partner and unite and create unity of the human spirit, and then deal with all the difficulties of what it also takes to lead, getting straight, being clear when there's no commitment there, and all these things, that all goes with it. So what I've just said may sound kind of quite highfalutin and perhaps not the stuff of boardrooms and executive teams and so on. It's at the very heart of it. For me, it's at the very heart of it. Let's live from there. Why not? Got this little bit of time on this planet. What's your mark? What's going to be your legacy? And to get to work with people to in any way contribute to that across the planet is an utter joy for me. What wouldn't be good about that? But what I've got to do is, and certainly I've got to deal with the idiot. That 20 years ago, whenever it was, when I had that insight, I had to deal with, flipping heck, I put myself into this international arena. I'm a frigging bigot. Excuse me. Of course I'm not committed to that. Of course I'm not. But not being responsible for it because it was so hidden. I mean, hidden. Hidden. But it made me small.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't play big. When I really wanted to play big, I couldn't play big. And then when I saw it for what it was, oh, you idiot. But, there's a greatness in owning your idiotness.
Yeah. And as we said before, it's through holding these big commitments, through contemplating these big possibilities, that we expose these parts of us that aren't consistent with that. And so that's such an important part of
Well, at least for
mechanism.
me, yeah, absolutely. At least that's been my experience, and the extent to which I can contribute has accelerated. Oh, massively because of that. And so any kind of confronting all the sort of physicalness that goes with it, the discomfort that goes with it is so outweighed by the amazing satisfaction and fulfillment with, in some small way, being able to contribute to something, and also to see the leaders that I have the joy and able to support, to see them grow, and I really have seen them grow, to grow and take things on and be daring and bold and courageous and amazing result producers. Well, who wouldn't love that?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And maybe that's a perfect place to close this conversation. I could speak to you for hours, but that was very powerful. Thank
Well,
you
we
for
got
sharing
going in the
all
end.
Of, yeah, your experience and your insights. Yeah, thank you so much.
Pleasure
And
to talk to you. Thank you
for sharing your home. Thank you.